The material for this lecture comes from chapter 21 in Poimen. So if you would like, you could open up the chapter and follow along with me. But make sure that you read the chapter on your own time, as I won't be covering everything in the chapter, and this lecture will be relatively brief. But we are looking in this lecture at the topic of libertarianism. So when it comes to determinism, as you read in last chapter, determinism is the belief that all of our actions are determined by some external force. Libertarianism argues that there is some sort of self-determinism. There is an agent in us that is the first cause of our actions. And so one argument for libertarian free will is the argument from deliberation. This argument was made by Corliss Lamont, who writes, "There is the unmistakable intuition of virtually every human being that he is free to make the choices he does, and that the deliberations leading to those choices are also free-flowing. The normal man feels, too, after he has made a decision, that he could have decided differently. That is why regret or remiss for a past choice can be so disturbing." The basic argument here is that our common sense experience tells us that we are free to choose between alternatives, and so it doesn't seem like every choice we make is determined by some external force. When I make a choice, I feel like I really was the one that made that choice. And furthermore, if that weren't the case, if I were not the one that made the free choice for my actions, then somehow it seems like I would not be responsible for my actions. And so if determinism were true, then human effort or trying to change your behaviors would seem to be pointless. Furthermore, trying to go through some sort of mental struggle in the pursuit of truth would also be pointless if every thought that I have is ultimately determined by some outside force. Well, determinists do have objections to this. The first objection would simply be to state that our feelings of freedom, while we really do feel that, are simply an illusion. And so one of the reasons why they might argue this is to ask us to think deeper about the acts that we make or the choices that we make in life. It seems as if our motivations deep down ultimately control our actions. And so you can find an argument in your book that goes something like this. So our actions are the result or are caused by beliefs and desires. Premise 2. We do not freely choose our beliefs and desires. 3. Beliefs and desires are thrusted on us by our environment in conjunction with innate dispositions. Conclusion: we do not freely choose our actions, but our actions are caused by the causal processes that form our beliefs and desires. So here might be an example of this. When I was in college, lived in a house where our landlord, we rented a house with a bunch of roommates, where our landlord required us to rake the lawn when fall came about. It was our responsibility, and if we didn't rake the lawn, then we would get a pretty hefty fine. Well, one day, while my roommates and I were outside raking the lawn, I made the comment that I really don't want to be out here raking the lawn right now. And my roommate responded to me, well, yes you do. If you really didn't want to do this, then you wouldn't be doing it. And so we got into a little bit of an argument about whether I wanted to be raking the lawn or not. But what the argument came down to was this. There was a desire inside of me that didn't want to rake the lawn, but yet I was still out there raking it. And the reason I was out there raking the lawn was because I had a second desire, and my second desire was this desire to be responsible. And so at the moment, that desire to be responsible was higher than my desire to not rake the lawn. But now if we think deeply about that, did I cause myself that desire to be responsible, did I cause that to happen to myself? Well, the determinist will argue you didn't cause that desire to be there. That desire might have been put there by your environment. Perhaps you were raised in a family. Perhaps I was raised in a family where I was taught to be a responsible person. And so if I was raised in that type of environment, then I would naturally have these desires to want to be responsible, but I did not cause those desires to be there in the first place. So the determinist argues that while you feel like you are making choices, the reality is every choice that you make is caused by desires that you have, but those desires that you have are not caused by you, they're caused by some external force. So that is the objection to the argument from deliberation. Well, now there are counter responses, and I'm just going to give one. The libertarian counter response to this is that agents themselves are the cause of their own acts. And to understand this counter response, it might be helpful to diagram what's being talked about here. Let's say we have three individuals, Joe, Jill, and James. Each of these individuals produce certain actions. So action 1, action 2, action 3. So Joe is going out and action 1 is raking the lawn. Jill, action 2 for her is maybe mowing the lawn. James, action 3 might be painting the house. And so these are all different actions that Joe, Jill, and James are doing. And so it seems like they are freely doing these actions. They're choosing the actions that they are acting out at this moment. The determinist says behind all of those choices, there is an external cause that is causing each three of them to make different actions. This is the determinist way of conceiving the choices that we make. Well, the libertarian says the determinist argues this because the determinist recognizes that there are desires and beliefs that on the surface seem like they're outside of our control. And the libertarian actually agrees with this, or can actually agree with this. But the issue is this cause is not the same source. So Joe, Jill, and James, in the determinist perspective, all can be traced back to the same type of cause. The libertarian, however, argues for a self-determination or an agent causation. So Joe really does have desires that, at least initially, aren't part of his own control. But the point is, Joe's desires did come about from himself, from his own agency. He's a free agent that has, throughout life, done certain things that have caused him to have the desires that he has. And so from those desires, then, he is able to do action 1. Same for Jill, same for James. But the point here in libertarianism is, while there are causes for our actions, those causes themselves are not the same cause. There are different agents that each are the first cause of their own action. And so that's how the libertarian understands this reality, that it seems like our desires are the cause of our actions. Well, that was brief, and that's all I have for this lecture today. So as I said at the beginning, make sure that you read chapter 21. It's not a very long chapter. But that's a brief introduction to libertarianism. And as you read through the chapter, make sure that you pay special attention to the argument from quantum physics. There's a small section on that argument. And then also to the argument from moral responsibility.